Now, from CBS 4 News, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Good morning, I'm Jim DeFede and welcome to Facing South Florida. We've got a good show for you this morning. Later, I'll be joined by Mary Barzee Flores, the Democratic candidate who is now challenging longtime Republican Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart. But first, an issue that has been an ongoing problem in Miami Dade County for more than 10 years. Sex offenders forced into homelessness by a law that bars them from residing within 2,500 feet of a school. Now, these are sex offenders who were convicted of a crime against a child, served their sentence, and are now back in society. You may remember back in 2009 when Miami-Dade was embarrassed nationally in the press because the law had created a camp of homeless sex offenders under the Julia Tuttle Causeway. That site was ultimately shut down, but they simply moved to other sites, most notably a section of land along the train tracks around 71st Street and Northwest 31st Avenue. We are taping this on Friday, and county officials are expected to try and break up that camp in the coming days. In a moment, we'll be joined by the man who pushed the law. But first, the ACLU went to court on Thursday to try to stop the county. My colleague Amber Diaz was at the hearing and filed this report.
The ACLU lost its battle in court today, the judge denying an injunction that would stop the county from evicting squatters and sex offenders and predators from this camp here near Hialeah.
Our clients are disappointed that the court has allowed the county to close the encampment. We'll review our options, but because of the difficulty they have finding housing, they will most likely relocate to another corner to avoid arrest. New encampments will pop up, and the cycle will continue.
Over the weekend, the Homeless Trust came out for the last time, offering to help find real homes for these people. Mary Nin was one of them. She was excited to find a place of her own, but that'll have to wait. Her housing application was denied.
They just told me I don't get enough money to get an apartment. And I'm like, what the hell? Why they made me waste my time? You know, I know they tried to help me, but you should have told me that from the beginning so I know where I'm standing. So it's like, you know, and now I'm a little confused. I really don't know what to do, really.
Pastor Vincent Spann came out to the site offering food and water. He says there is a warehouse around the corner and its owners are willing to help.
I have a building right around the corner that can house everybody out here right now. I called the Homeless Trust. They don't want to support it. They'd rather them go somewhere else, and they don't want to support a warehouse.
We reached out to the Homeless Trust about this offer, and they are looking into the facility. In the meantime, these people will have to find somewhere else to go. Technically, after Sunday, they're considered trespassing.
That was Amber Diaz. The law in question is called the Lauren Book Child Safety Ordinance, and it's worth providing a little background. Lauren Book was an 11-year-old child when her nanny began sexually abusing her, abuse that went on for years. As an adult, Lauren has become an advocate for children and is now a state senator. Her father is Ron Book, one of the most powerful and well-connected lobbyists in the state. Ron Book took all of his anger and rage and guilt and used that one weapon that he could wield, the ability to get elected officials to do what he wants. So in 2005, he started pushing this law, first in Miami Beach, then across both Dade and Broward. He remains a strong advocate for the law, and he joins us now. Ron, thank you for coming in.
Good morning, Jim.
So
nice
a quick correction, you caught it. Actually, it's 36th Avenue, not 31st Avenue.
That's correct.
I've been out there a bunch myself, and I should have caught that myself. That's my mistake. So a couple of things. Where do we stand right now? ACLU has lost their case. Where do things stand right now in terms of what's going to happen in the next few days?
Well, first of all, you had a health crisis on that property. You have people that have been living there for 4 years. Allegedly, there are 270 people that are registered there. There have never been more than 100 who have put their heads on pillows or whatever they sleep on at night. They're on the site. Where are those other 170? Nobody really knows. They've registered that as an address. Society determined way long ago that if you commit a crime, a sexual deviant act against a child, and you are convicted of it, we're going to treat you differently. Society determined that well before now. One of those conditions is you have to register where you live. You can live homeless in our community or any other community in our state. Courts have said that. You got to list the street you're living on and the closest cross street. 170 people or more are not living where they say they are. What's going to happen? The encampment has been broken up at this point. People have been pushed to move on to live somewhere else. The Homeless Trust started in August. of 2017, making it extremely clear on over a dozen nighttime visits out to the encampment, where we started at 8 o'clock at night and worked until after midnight, processing individuals, encouraging them to help us help them by finding housing that we would help facilitate the costs on. First month, last month, a month rent, in certain circumstances, depending on their economics and their employability, maybe a month or two addition.
All right. So let's talk about the law itself. First, let's just establish one thing. The law is called the Lauren Book Child Safety Ordinance. You acknowledge, though, that this ordinance would have done nothing to have protected your daughter, correct?
Well, I would agree with that. That's correct. And we've never said otherwise.
Okay, but usually when laws are passed with somebody's name, it's because it would have helped that person.
We didn't put her name on the act. Commissioner Diaz chose to put her name on the act in the county commission. We didn't advocate for that. So that's first of all. Second of all, I want to correct something else you've said.
Sure.
And you've now said it twice in the first 3 minutes of this. You've said that the act has caused their homelessness, that the act is what has created the situation. That is not at all correct, Jim. What created the situation is their criminal act. The fact that they had sexually deviant activities with young children. That makes their act the cause of their circumstance.
So let's just go.
They like to blame everybody else and everything else for their plight.
So tell me right now, cite me the study that says that a 2,500-foot residency requirement keeps children safe. Tell me the study.
Well, first of all, there are experts around the country, and when
What
the
study?
ACLU's latest case, which they've lost repeatedly, they have now found another way to weasel their way into court.
So Ron, you don't have a study.
There are plenty of studies, Jim. There are plenty. So let me ask me to bring studies.
So let me ask you this. So here we are right here. So 2006.
Jim, by the way, let's stop for a second. In the only case on residency restrictions to be litigated to the United States Supreme Court is the case out of Iowa. Let me finish. Right. The experts for the John Does, the predators, their own experts said they can't and they won't ever testify that their individuals that they've counseled won't commit another sexual deviant act.
So in Iowa, let's talk about Iowa. In 2006, the county prosecutors issued a finding. Here was their finding. Research shows that there is no correlation between residency restrictions and reducing sex offenses against children or improving safety. Residency restrictions are intended to reduce sex crimes against children by strangers who seek children who they covet their locations. These crimes are tragic but very rare. In fact, 80–90% of sex crimes against children are committed by relatives or acquaintances, just as in the case of yours.
You love and trust.
So
Jim,
residency doesn't do anything.
At the end of the day, that's just not true, Jim. If you put predators and offenders in close proximity to kids, they look for their next victim. Their own expert.
Where is the study?
It's in the Iowa decision.
Department of Justice.
The appellate court decision.
Ron, let me just read this. U.S. Department of Justice. This was their conclusion. The evidence is fairly clear that residence restrictions are not effective. In fact, the research suggests that residence restrictions may actually increase offender risk by undermining the ability and stability of offenders to obtain housing, work, and family support. That's the Department of Justice. Kansas. They did a study themselves. Although resident restrictions appear to have strong public support, the board found no evidence to support its efficacy. It's imperative that policymakers enact laws that will actually make the public safe and not to giving laws that give them a false sense of security.
Let's just be clear. I repeat, nobody has ever said a residency restriction creates any kind of anything other than it is a piece of a puzzle. It is the aggregation of laws that protect people. And at the end of the day, a little common sense is necessary. A little common sense that says that you should not put predators, people who have a hardwire problem. People have a hardwire problem in close proximity to where children are.
So, Ron, what happens? So, if I'm a sex offender and I'm getting out of prison, what's the first thing that happens to me under the Jimmy Rice law?
You got to register.
Got to register, and don't you also have to do an analysis as to whether or not I'm a danger to the community and need to be civilly committed?
Actually, You are not, actually you're mistaken, Jim. Everybody that exits the system does not get assessed and determine whether or not they are continuing to be a risk to the community. That is untrue.
What does Jimmy Rice law do?
The Jimmy Rice Act allows the prosecutors to civilly commit a person for the rest of their life.
So there.
That doesn't mean they're
not. So isn't that a better way to deal with it?
Oh my God. No, it is not. Jim, it is but a piece. You need to keep predators away from children. And I would suspect that the people that are listening to this show this morning would say to you, they don't want them living anywhere near them because they know what happens. Ron, they know what grooming is about.
So here's the reality, Ron. You've created a false impression because here's the reality.
No,
the residency restriction.
Go back and listen to the
residency restriction.
Jim,
go back. I've been out there plenty of times, Ron.
Jim. Go back and listen to the minutes of the meetings, the commission meetings, where the 2,500 foot got adopted, and we said this is not any end-all cure-all.
Ron, it's
Do not
nothing.
roll yourself
it does
into
the worse than that. It makes them more likely to reoffend. Here's the reality.
People can disagree, Jim, and we disagree on this.
Here's the reality, Ron. When a sex offender, the residency requirements under the sex offender thing says that in a sense eventually it is 8 p.m. they have to show up at these sites. They are on probation, and so wait a second. Their residence is determined as to where they sleep.
That's right.
So they end up spending their day. They can spend their day anywhere they want, and then at 8 p.m. or 10 p.m., depending on their rules, they cannot.
Actually, Jim, 10 years ago they laughed about that, and so what we did was we came back with
the loitering.
That's correct.
And the loitering is a great part of the bill.
The Child Protection Act.
And that goes to the heart of it. So you have a loitering ordinance that says that if a registered sex offender loiters within 300 feet of a school or where places or children congregate with the intent to do harm, there's an intent clause. There is I got the ordinance right here. There's an intent clause. With that intent, they can be arrested.
They cannot loiter. Period.
With the intent.
Okay. I don't believe intent has ever been a component of arresting them for loitering around those places, because it is assumed, presumed, and understood that if they're there to scout out their next intended victim.
It is unlawful for any sex offender or sexual predator to loiter or prowl with the intent to commit a sexual offense as listed in 21-80. It says it right here in the ordinance.
Jim,
with the intent.
Offender,
they have an entire section on intent.
That's right, and that's right.
So then I was right, you were wrong.
Jim, at the end of the day, everybody understands that a predator who has been convicted is always out looking for their next victim.
Are all sex offenders predators, or is predator? So you do
Predator
this, Ron.
defines
You do this,
predator,
Ron. You intermingle the two terms often.
Well, actually, prosecutors and public defenders do exactly the same thing.
But let's be specific with the language. Not all sex offenders are predators, correct?
All sex offenders and all predators are not created equal. That would be correct.
So you create a blanket proposal that says 2,500 feet. Does the 2,500 foot rule come with, is there a scientific basis for the 2,500 foot rule?
Actually, it met the rational basis test completely. Can you
but
tell
what was
me,
the scientific study?
Can you tell me if it's a requirement in every jurisdiction in Florida to cite a restaurant with a liquor license, a bar, a tavern? They've got to be spaced 2,500 feet away from schools, parks, playgrounds, and law-abiding citizens go to those
and
places.
they all get exceptions.
No, they don't get special exceptions.
So, but here's the point,
correct.
Ron.
They get to apply for special exceptions.
Ron, you cannot tell me, sitting here, let's recap. There is no rational basis for the 2,500 foot as in terms of study.
No, I don't agree with you.
You cannot cite a single study that says the 2,500 foot rule keeps people safe.
We have had experts go into courts of law all over the United States of America and testify, and the courts have accepted them.
Colorado, Minnesota, on down the line.
You know what? And they made decisions that I wouldn't want made by my public officials.
Because you are making it out of fear. You are scaring the public rather than providing them actual information.
The public ought to be afraid of predators and offenders, Jim.
So when these folks,
every one of them,
so what happens,
without any exception.
So then what happens when these folks get out of prison? What do you want to do them? Do you want them with their families so that they can end up having?
You don't want to recognize they've found plenty of places to live, and I will concede that a large percentage of them were grandfathered in, but a lot of
Turn
people,
to the camera.
a lot of people have found places to live in Miami-Dade County that are registered offenders and predators.
I've been going out to the site on 71st Street for 3 years, and I've talked to the guys out there, some of them, and I will tell you that what ends up happening is they end up sleeping there at night and then going home because they have a family.
I know that.
They have families,
and
rather than wait a second.
Do you want me to have sympathy for that population? Because I don't.
It's not a question of sympathy.
They shouldn't be homeless. They shouldn't be homeless.
It's not a question of sympathy, Ron. It's a question of how do you either you imprison them forever or you reintegrate them into society.
Works for me.
Okay.
That would work for me.
So is the design of this to just force them out of the county?
No, that was never the design. And by the way, 2,500-foot restrictions exist all over Florida, not just in Miami-Dade
Thanks to you.
County.
You were a driving force behind it.
I'm not. What do you want me to deny that? Because I'm not embarrassed.
So when
or
they get
ashamed
out,
of it.
when they get out, right? What are the keys to not having them recidivate, not having them offend again, is a family support system, stability in their lives. By turning them into homeless individuals, you are denying them that ability. They are no longer near where they need to get counseling. They don't have the family support they need. It's a myth. You're telling them they cannot be within 2,500 feet of a school.
How many predators and offenders live in Miami-Dade County?
By the way,
how many?
How many? Say that again.
How many predators and offenders are registered in Miami-Dade County?
I don't know the exact number.
Thousands. You would agree. Thousands.
Yes.
And
Hundreds.
There's 100 living in this encampment.
28% of the sex offenders.
It is an inconsequential percentage.
It is not an inconsequential percentage.
Oh my goodness, Jim. You admit that there are thousands that live in Miami-Dade County that have housing
that are grandfathered because
there's
before the law.
People. Jim, the Department of Corrections, by their own admission in a conference call this morning, release hundreds every month into our community.
Either we treat them and deal with them in a real way, or you just create the scare that you've done with this.
Well, I will say again, reasonable people can disagree. We disagree on this one. We agree on some things, we disagree on some things. We disagree on this one.
No studies, no backing.
There are studies, Jim, and there are experts who go into courts of law. That's why the courts have upheld them. Why did the circuit judge just this past week?
It's a health hazard. They've created it you've turned into a health hazard.
Okay. And by the way, the courts have also said that the health, safety, and welfare of the law-abiding public is the paramount interest, not the interest of convicted predators.
The studies,
which, by the way, if the Supreme Court thought you were right and thought there was no evidence and nothing to substantiate it, the court would have thrown the residency restrictions out. They didn't.
2003 was that Supreme Court decision, right?
That's correct.
Right. A long time ago.
It was a liberal court.
Yeah.
It was a liberal court.
Ron,
it was a more liberal court than it is today, is it not?
It's probably a more liberal court than it was today. Ron, how are these people supposed to be reintegrated into society?
They need to work to find places to live. Most of the people that were living on 71st and Northwest 36th Avenue did nothing to try to find a place to live between August and now.
They can't afford because
they can't afford what? They can't afford it because Miami-Dade is the toughest rental market in America, and they're unemployable.
No. One of the guys who I talk to on a regular basis, he has a job. He's a bus driver. Not a school bus driver, but he's a bus driver, right? He ends up having to go out there every night and sleep in his car.
I wonder where he's driving that bus.
See, that's what you want to do, Ron. You want to stigmatize, right? That's fine.
You know what? Stigmatize? Jim, society said we're going to treat these people differently. That is why they're required to register.
All right? They're animals.
You've never heard me say that.
You consider them all monsters, though, right?
You've not heard me use the word monsters, although at some point I may have referred to them as monsters. You know what, Jim? They're not good people.
So then lock them up forever.
No, it doesn't defend me. I'd be happy to encourage that.
Because that's the real alternative.
By the way, that was what the law used to be.
Lock them away forever.
That's correct.
Right.
They're a danger to our children.
Ron, thank you very much for coming in. It's always a pleasure. All right. We couldn't show this entire interview, but please go to cbsmiami.com and we'll have the rest of it. This debate between Ron and I will be posted there. Up next, the woman who is hoping to oust Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart.